Have you ever looked in the mirror and promised yourself you'd change? Start that project, hit the gym, or chase your dreams, only to let tomorrow become a lie you keep telling yourself? Welcome to ZenLight 8, where we cut through the excuses with raw Stoic wisdom. In today's video, we're diving into how to stop betraying yourself and start taking action today. Buckle up. This isn't just a wake-up call. It's a battle plan to unleash the unbreakable version of you, the silent saboteur within. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whispering promises of a better tomorrow, a stronger you, a life you've always dreamed of. You tell yourself, I'll leap tomorrow. I'll start when I'm ready. When the stars align, I'll soar. But tomorrow slips into next week, next month, next year, and that cliff remains unclimbed. The dreams stay distant, and the promises you made to yourself turn into echoes, fading into the quiet corners of your mind. This is the hidden war we all fight, not against the world, but against the silent saboteur within, self-deception. It's not a loud enemy, shouting accusations or waving red flags. No, it's far more insidious, cloaked in the soft, comforting guise of later, not now, or I deserve a break. On ZenLight 8, we're peeling back the layers of this internal betrayal, diving deep into the Stoic wisdom that teaches us how to stop lying to ourselves and start living with truth. Because the greatest chain you'll ever wear isn't forged by circumstance. It's woven by the promises you break to yourself. Self-deception doesn't storm into your life like a hurricane. It creeps in like morning fog, subtle and unassuming, wrapping you in a haze you barely notice until you're lost. It starts with a single whisper, I'll skip today. It's just one day. That whisper feels like a friend, offering you a moment of relief, a chance to rest. Maybe you're tired after a long week, or the task ahead feels daunting. So you nod to that voice, convinced it's harmless, and let the day slide. But that whisper doesn't stop there. It grows, weaving itself into your thoughts until it's no longer a suggestion but a doctrine. I'll get to it when I feel motivated, you say. I'll start when life slows down. These aren't just words. They're votes you cast against your own potential, ballots for a future where nothing changes. The Stoics, those ancient architects of resilience, knew this enemy well. They understood that the mind is a canvas, and every thought you entertain paints it with the colors of your future. Marcus Aurelius warned that the soul becomes dyed with the hue of its thoughts, a slow staining process where one excuse today becomes the foundation for a dozen tomorrow. Consider the story of Sarah, a graphic designer in her 30s living in Chicago. She always dreamed of launching her own freelance business, creating art that spoke to the world. Every January, she'd sit down with a fresh notebook, sketching out plans, promising herself this would be the year. But by February, the whispers would start. I'm too busy at work, she'd tell herself. I'll focus on this when my portfolio's perfect. Months turned into years, and that notebook gathered dust on a shelf, a silent monument to promises unkept. Sarah wasn't lazy. She was talented, driven even, but she fell into the trap of believing that someday would magically arrive. The truth is, someday is a myth we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of starting now. It's a lie dressed up as patience, and it keeps us tethered to the ground when we were born to fly. What makes self-deception so lethal is its ability to disguise itself as self-care. When you skip a workout, you might say, I'm listening to my body. When you push a goal to next week, you might think, I'm being realistic. These aren't blatant lies. They're soft, reasonable, and oh so convincing. But every time you buy into them, you're not just delaying a task. You're reshaping your identity. You're teaching yourself that your word doesn't matter, that your dreams can wait, that you're someone who bends under pressure instead of standing firm. Over time, these small surrenders compound like interest in a bank account you never wanted to open. You don't notice the shift at first. It's just a missed day, a postponed plan, but soon you're living a life that feels like a shadow of what it could be. The Stoics called this the slow death of the soul, not because you're failing spectacularly, but because you're failing quietly in the moments no one else sees. Think about the last time you promised yourself something meaningful. Maybe it was to write a book, learn a new skill, or simply get up earlier to start your day with intention. You felt that spark, that surge of possibility, didn't you? But then life got in the way, or so you told yourself. A deadline loomed, a friend needed you, or maybe you just didn't feel like it. So you pushed it aside, assuring yourself you'd pick it up later. But later never came, and that spark dimmed, replaced by a quiet unease, a nagging sense that you're not living up to who you could be. This is the real tragedy of self-deception. It doesn't just steal your time, it steals your belief in yourself. It convinces you that you're not the kind of person who follows through, that your goals are too big, that your dreams are meant for someone else. And the longer you listen, the harder it is to hear the voice of truth, the one that knows you're capable of more. But here's the good news. You're not doomed to this cycle. The Stoics didn't just diagnose the problem. They offered a way out. They believed that truth is the antidote to self-deception, and the truth starts with facing yourself head-on. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with clarity. Ask yourself, how many times this week did I say I'd do something and didn't? How many times did I let later win? This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about waking up. It's about recognizing that every time you break a promise to yourself, you're not just delaying a task. You're casting a vote for a version of you that settles, that shrinks, that stays small. But the opposite is also true. Every time you choose truth, every time you act despite the whispers, you're voting for a stronger, braver, freer you. Take a moment to picture a man named James, a father of 2 in Atlanta. For years, he told himself he'd get in shape, not just for himself but for his kids. He wanted to be the dad who could run with them, lift them high, be there for decades to come. But every Monday, the same whisper crept in, "I'll start next week. Work's too crazy right now." One day, he caught his reflection in a window, not just his body, but the weight of all those broken promises. That was his wake-up call. He didn't overhaul his life overnight. He started with a 10-minute walk each morning, rain or shine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a promise kept. Over time, those walks became runs, those runs became strength, and that strength became a new identity. James didn't just change his body, he changed how he saw himself. He became a man who kept his word, and that truth set him free. Self-deception thrives in the dark, where no one challenges it. It grows when you avoid the mirror, when you dodge the questions that sting. But the moment you shine a light on it, when you name it, confront it, refuse to let it rule you, you take back your power. You don't need a perfect plan or a burst of motivation. You need one honest choice, one moment where you say, "No more lies. I'm starting now." That choice is a seed, and every time you water it with action, it grows into something unshakable. The Stoics knew this. Freedom isn't found in escaping discomfort, but in embracing it, in choosing truth over ease, in building a life one honest step at a time. This battle against self-deception is just the beginning. It's the first step in a journey toward a life where your actions align with your dreams, where your word becomes your bond. But to truly break free, we need to understand what's at stake, what it costs when we let those whispers win. Let's dive into that next, because the price of lying to yourself is far heavier than you might think. The hidden cost of breaking your own word. Every time you tell yourself you'll do something and don't, it's like chipping away at a sculpture you've spent years carving. At first, the chip seems small, barely noticeable. A missed workout, a postponed project, a dream deferred to someday. You shrug it off, convinced it's no big deal. But those chips accumulate, and over time, they erode the very foundation of who you are. Your confidence cracks, your self-respect frays, and the belief you once had in your own potential starts to feel like a distant memory. This is the hidden cost of self-deception, the silent toll of breaking promises to yourself. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the weight of those broken vows. Not to shame you, but to show you what's at stake and why every lie you tell yourself matters more than you think. Because when you betray your own word, you don't just lose a moment. You lose a piece of your freedom, your power, and the life you were meant to live. The Stoics understood that the greatest battles are fought within, not against armies or empires, but against the quiet voices that tempt us to settle for less. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery begins with trust. Trust in your own word. When you break a promise to yourself, you're not just skipping a task. You're sending a message to your soul that you can't be counted on. It's like writing a check you know will bounce, and each time you do it, your internal bank account dwindles. You start to doubt your ability to follow through, to change, to grow. That doubt doesn't stay confined to one area of your life. It seeps into everything. Your relationships suffer because you're less present, less reliable, less sure of yourself. Your work falters because you second-guess your decisions, haunted by the ghost of promises unkept. Even your mental health takes a hit, as that quiet unease, the knowledge that you're not living up to your own standards, gnaws at you in the stillness of the night. Picture Emily, a single mom in Denver who always wanted to go back to school. She'd lie awake at night, imagining herself walking across a stage in a cap and gown, degree in hand, her daughter cheering from the crowd. Every semester, she'd promise herself, "This is it. I'm enrolling." But then life would intervene, or so she told herself. Bills piled up, her job demanded overtime, and that familiar whisper crept in, "I'll do it next year. It's not the right time." Each time she pushed that dream aside, she felt a pang of guilt, but she buried it, telling herself she was being practical. Yet with every broken promise, Emily's confidence eroded. She stopped trusting her own resolve, and that doubt bled into other parts of her life. She hesitated to ask for a promotion, convinced she wasn't ready. She pulled back from friends, afraid they'd see her as a failure. The lie she told herself, that she'd start later, didn't just delay her degree. It dimmed her belief in her own worth. That's the real cost of self-deception. It doesn't just steal your goals. It steals your sense of self. What's so insidious about breaking your word is how it traps you in a cycle of self-suspicion. You become your own jailer, locked in a prison built of excuses and half-truths. You start to live at the mercy of your moods, your fears, your fleeting desires. One day you're motivated, ready to conquer the world. The next, you're too tired, too busy, too not in the mood. This inconsistency isn't freedom. It's chaos. It's a life where you're tossed around by every whim, every obstacle, every bad day. The Stoics saw this as the opposite of a good life. They believed that true freedom comes from within, from the ability to govern yourself regardless of what's happening outside. When you lie to yourself, you hand over the keys to your life to forces you can't control. Your emotions, your circumstances, the endless distractions of the world. You become a passenger in your own story, not the driver. But it's not just about you. The cost of self-deception ripples outward, touching everyone around you. When you don't trust yourself, it's harder to trust others. You project your own unreliability onto them, assuming they'll let you down just as you've let yourself down. You show up half-heartedly in conversations, in commitments, in love, because deep down you're not sure you're worth showing up for fully. Your colleagues notice your hesitation. Your friends feel your distance. Your family senses your unrest. You might not say it out loud, but your actions speak. "I'm not someone who follows through." And that message shapes how the world sees you, not because they're judging, but because you've taught them to expect less. The tragedy is that you're capable of so much more, but you've convinced yourself, through years of broken promises, that more isn't meant for you. Now imagine a different path. Imagine waking up each morning knowing you can count on yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you've built a track record of keeping your word. Imagine the quiet confidence that comes from looking in the mirror and seeing someone who doesn't run from their own promises. That's not a fantasy, it's a choice. It's the choice to stop letting later win, to stop letting excuses define you. The Stoics didn't promise an easy life, but they promised a free one, a life where you're not chained to your own doubts. Every time you break your word, you tighten those chains. But every time you keep it, you loosen them inch by inch until one day you realize you're no longer a prisoner. You're the one holding the key. This cost of self-deception is heavy, but it's not the end of the story. The Stoics didn't just warn us about the price of lying to ourselves. They showed us the power of truth, the strength that comes from honoring our commitments. Let's turn to that next, because keeping your word isn't just about avoiding loss. It's about building something extraordinary, brick by brick, day by day. The power of keeping your word. There's a moment every morning, just before the world wakes up, when you have a choice. It's not loud or dramatic. No one's watching, no one's cheering. It's just you standing at the crossroads of who you are and who you could be. Will you keep the promise you made to yourself yesterday to get up, to show up, to do the work? Or will you let that promise slip, telling yourself it's just one day, just one time? That moment, small as it seems, is where your life is shaped. It's where self-respect is forged, not in grand gestures or viral moments, but in the quiet, relentless act of doing what you said you'd do. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the transformative power of keeping your word, drawing on Stoic wisdom to show you how every promise kept is a brick in the fortress of your character. Because when you honor your commitments, you're not just checking off a task. You're building a version of yourself you can trust, a version that's unshakable, unstoppable, and free. Self-respect isn't something you're born with, nor is it handed to you like a diploma or a paycheck. It's earned, carved out of the raw material of your daily choices. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. They didn't chase applause or external validation. They chased integrity, the kind that burns bright even when no one's looking. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." That's not just advice. It's a blueprint for a life of strength. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you're living that blueprint. You're proving to yourself that you're someone who can be counted on, someone whose word is ironclad. It's not about the size of the promise, whether it's making your bed, writing a single paragraph, or taking a 10-minute walk. It's about the act of follow-through. Each time you do what you said you'd do, you lay down a brick, and those bricks stack up, day after day, into a foundation that nothing can shake. Consider Jake, a barista in Seattle who always wanted to write a novel. For years, he told himself he'd start when the time was right. But life kept getting in the way. Long shifts, bills, the endless noise of a busy city. One day, he decided to stop waiting. He made a simple promise. Write 100 words every morning before work. Some days, those words flowed like a river. Other days, they felt like pulling teeth. But Jake kept showing up, not because he felt inspired, but because he'd made a vow to himself. Over months, those 100 words became pages, then chapters. More importantly, they became something deeper, a belief in his own reliability. Jake wasn't just writing a book. He was rewriting his identity. He went from someone who dreamed of writing to someone who wrote, and that shift changed everything. His confidence grew, his posture straightened, and when he walked into the coffee shop, he carried himself like a man who knew his worth. Not because anyone told him so, but because he'd proven it to himself, one word at a time. That's the magic of keeping your word. It compounds. Every promise kept is a deposit in the bank of your self-trust. And over time, those deposits accrue interest. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who hopes or wishes, but as someone who does. That shift isn't loud or flashy. It's subtle, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. But it's powerful. It shows up in how you handle challenges, how you face setbacks, how you walk into a room. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone because you've already proven yourself to the only person who matters. You. The Stoics called this inner strength eudaimonia, a flourishing of the soul that comes not from wealth or fame, but from living in alignment with your values. When you keep your word, you're not just building habits. You're building a life that feels whole, a life where your actions match your aspirations. But it's not always easy. Life throws curveballs. Deadlines, exhaustion, doubts that creep in like uninvited guests. Keeping your word means showing up even when it's inconvenient, even when your body begs for rest or your mind screams for escape. Especially then, that's when it counts most. Think of Maria, a nurse in Miami who promised herself she'd meditate for 5 minutes every evening to manage stress. After 12-hour shifts, those 5 minutes felt like climbing a mountain. There were nights she wanted to collapse on the couch, scroll her phone, and call it a day. But she'd light a candle, sit cross-legged on her living room floor, and breathe. Not because it was glamorous, but because she'd made a commitment. Those 5 minutes didn't just calm her mind. They reminded her who she was. Someone who didn't break under pressure. Someone who honored her own needs. Over time, that practice became her anchor, a steady pulse that kept her grounded through chaos. Maria's story isn't unique. It's universal. We all have moments where keeping our word feels like a battle, but those battles are where we forge our strength. What's beautiful about this process is how it reshapes your identity. Every time you follow through, you're telling yourself a new story. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who can be trusted. That story isn't built on empty affirmations or wishful thinking. It's built on evidence, the kind you create with your own hands. You start to see yourself as capable, reliable, worthy, not because you're chasing perfection, but because you're choosing consistency. The Stoics understood that character isn't a gift. It's a craft, honed through countless small decisions no one else sees. When you wake up early to jog despite the rain, when you finish a task you'd rather avoid, when you say no to distraction and yes to discipline, you're sculpting a version of yourself that's resilient, grounded, and free. Free from the weight of self-doubt, free from the need for external approval, free to live a life you're proud of. This freedom doesn't come cheap. It's earned through sweat, grit, and the courage to keep going when no one's watching. But it's worth every ounce of effort, because when you trust yourself, the world feels less chaotic. You become the rock in your own life, unshaken by storms or setbacks. You become the kind of person who doesn't flinch when life gets hard, not because you're fearless, but because you've trained yourself to act despite fear. That's the gift of keeping your word. It doesn't just build habits. It builds you. It turns you into someone who can look in the mirror and say, I did what I said I'd do, and mean it. And that simple truth carries a power that no amount of money, fame, or applause can match. We've seen the cost of breaking our promises and the strength that comes from keeping them. But there's another layer to this journey, one that asks us to confront the excuses we lean on, the justifications that feel so light in the moment but grow heavy over time. Let's explore that next, because understanding the weight of those excuses is the key to breaking free from their grip. Breaking free from the weight of excuses. Picture yourself standing at the starting line of a race you've been training for your whole life. Your heart's pounding, your dreams are on the other side, and all you have to do is take that first step. But then a voice creeps in, soft and familiar. It's not the right time. You're too tired. Maybe tomorrow. That voice feels like a friend, offering you a way out, a moment to catch your breath. So you step back, promising yourself you'll run tomorrow. But tomorrow brings another excuse, and then another, until the starting line is a distant memory, and you're left carrying a backpack full of reasons why you never began. Excuses might feel light when you make them, but they pile up, heavy as stones, until you can barely move forward. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the Stoic wisdom that teaches us to shed this burden, to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start acting despite the obstacles. Because the life you want isn't found in explanations. It's built through action, one deliberate step at a time. Excuses are seductive. They slip out of your mouth like a sigh, effortless and soothing. I'm too busy, you say when a deadline looms. I'll get to it when things calm down. You tell yourself as life swirls around you. In the moment, they feel like a gift. A little permission slip to avoid discomfort, to stay safe, to rest. But what you don't see is the weight they add to your load. Each excuse is a pebble dropped into your backpack, small enough to ignore at first, but over time, those pebbles become boulders. They slow your stride, bend your back, and make every step toward your goals feel like a slog. The Stoics saw through this illusion. They knew that excuses aren't harmless. They're thieves, stealing your momentum, your clarity, your chance to become the person you're meant to be. Seneca wrote, "You have all the time you'll ever need if you stop wasting it." Every excuse is a moment wasted, a choice to carry a burden you don't have to bear. Take the story of Chris, a carpenter in Austin who dreamed of starting his own furniture business. He had the skills, the vision, even a garage full of tools. But every time he thought about taking the leap, excuses poured in like rain. "The market's too tough right now," he'd say. "I don't have enough savings to take the risk." For years, he let those reasons keep him tethered to a job he didn't love, building someone else's dreams instead of his own. Each excuse felt reasonable, logical even, but they piled up, weighing on his spirit. He'd lie awake at night, not just dreaming of what could be, but haunted by what wasn't. The turning point came when he stumbled across a quote from Marcus Aurelius. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That hit Chris like a lightning bolt. He realized the economy would never be perfect, his bank account would never feel ready, but he could control his actions. So he started small, building one chair, posting it online, taking one order at a time. Each step was a pebble removed from his backpack, lightening his load until he could run toward his dream instead of crawling. What makes excuses so dangerous is how they disguise themselves as wisdom. They don't sound like weakness, they sound like strategy. "I'm just being realistic," you tell yourself when you skip a goal. "I'm prioritizing what matters," you say when you push your dreams to the back burner. But realism doesn't mean surrender, and priorities don't mean abandoning yourself. The Stoics taught that the external world will never align perfectly. No day will be free of rain, no week free of chaos, no moment free of doubt. Waiting for the ideal conditions is like waiting for a storm to pass before you learn to sail. The storm is the lesson. The obstacles are the path. Every time you lean on an excuse, you're not just delaying progress, you're reinforcing a habit of avoidance, teaching yourself that discomfort is a reason to stop instead of a signal to push forward. But here's the truth. You don't need perfect conditions to start. You don't need the stars to align or the world to pause. You just need one choice: to act instead of explain, to move instead of justify. That choice is lighter than any excuse, and it has the power to set you free. Think of excuses as weights you choose to carry. Every time you say, "I can't because," you add another stone to your load. But every time you say, "I will, despite," you drop one, freeing yourself to move faster, stand taller, breathe easier. The Stoics believed that the only thing you control is your response to the world, and excuses are a response, a choice to let circumstances dictate your life instead of shaping it yourself. When you stop making them, you reclaim that control. You become the architect of your days, not a bystander watching them slip away. This isn't about never feeling overwhelmed or unsure. It's about refusing to let those feelings write your story. Imagine Rachel, a college student in Boston who wanted to learn coding. She'd watch tech influencers online, dreaming of a career in software, but her excuses were relentless. "I'm not good at math," she'd say. "I don't have time with my classes." Those words kept her stuck until one day she decided to try, just 15 minutes a day, one free online course. It wasn't perfect. She struggled, made mistakes, felt out of her depth, but she kept going, not because the excuses vanished, but because she refused to let them win. Over months, those 15 minutes became skills, then projects, then a portfolio that landed her an internship. Rachel didn't wait for confidence or clarity. She acted despite the noise in her head, and that action became her freedom. The beauty of shedding excuses is how it changes the way you walk through the world. You start to feel lighter, not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of what if. You stop waking up with the heaviness of yesterday's reasons and start waking up with the energy of today's possibilities. The Stoics would remind you that time is not promised. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and neither is next week. The best time to drop that backpack of excuses is right now, in this moment, by choosing to act instead of explain. Because every step you take without that weight is a step toward a life you can be proud of. A life where you're not defined by what held you back, but by what you overcame. We've seen how excuses weigh us down, but the Stoics didn't just tell us to avoid them. They showed us how to replace them with action, how to build a life of purpose through daily discipline. Let's dive into that next, because the path to freedom starts with one small, deliberate choice today. The power of daily action, Stoic style. Every morning, the world offers you a blank page, a chance to write the story of who you are and who you're becoming. It's not a grand stage with spotlights and crowds. It's a quiet moment, just you and the promises you've made to yourself. Will you fill that page with action, or will you leave it blank, waiting for inspiration that never comes? The Stoics believed that greatness isn't born in bursts of brilliance. It's forged in the steady rhythm of daily effort, in the small, unglamorous choices no one else sees. On ZenLight 8, we're unpacking how to live this truth, how to start today, no matter how small the step, and keep going no matter how many times you stumble. Because the life you want isn't waiting for the perfect moment. It's waiting for you to show up day after day with the courage to act. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we need to feel ready. We wait for motivation, for clarity, for the stars to align before we begin. But the Stoics knew that waiting is a trap. Epictetus said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great." Action doesn't follow motivation, it creates it. Think of it like a fire. You don't wait for the flames to appear before striking a match. You strike the match, tend the spark, and let the fire grow. That's what daily action does. It's the spark that ignites your progress, the fuel that keeps it burning. You don't need to overhaul your life or conquer the world today. You just need one small act, one promise kept, one step forward. That step could be as simple as drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning, writing a single sentence, or taking a 5-minute walk. The size doesn't matter, what matters is the choice to begin. Consider Lisa, a teacher in Phoenix who wanted to get healthier. For years, she'd start diets on Mondays, only to abandon them by Wednesday, convinced she needed more willpower or a better plan. One day, she decided to try a different approach. Walk for 10 minutes after dinner, every night, no exceptions. It wasn't a marathon or a gym membership, it was just a walk. Some nights, she felt energized. Others, she dragged herself out the door, grumbling. But she kept her promise, and those 10 minutes became 20, then 30. Over months, she lost weight, gained energy, and found a clarity she hadn't felt in years. But the real change wasn't in her body, it was in her mind. Lisa learned she could rely on herself, not because she was perfect, but because she showed up. That daily walk wasn't just exercise. It was a vote for the person she wanted to become, cast every single evening. This is the Stoic way, start small but start now. Don't wait for the thunderbolt of inspiration or the perfect circumstances, because they'll never come. Life is messy, unpredictable, full of distractions and detours. The Stoics didn't expect a clear path, they expected obstacles, and they taught us to move through them, not around them. When you act despite the chaos, you're not just building habits, you're building trust. Every time you follow through, you're telling yourself, "I'm someone who keeps going." That message compounds, like a snowball rolling downhill, growing stronger and faster with every turn. Over time, the tasks that once felt impossible become natural, not because they got easier, but because you got stronger. But what happens when you fail? Because you will. No one, not even the greatest Stoics, walked a flawless path. You'll miss a day, break a promise, stumble over your own doubts. The key isn't avoiding failure, it's refusing to let it define you. When you fall, the Stoic response is simple. Get back up now. Don't wait for Monday. Don't wait for the new year. Don't spiral into despair or let one bad day become a bad week. Acknowledge the slip, learn from it, and return to the work. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. Think of Thomas, a musician in Nashville who wanted to release his first album. He'd promised himself he'd write one song a week, but some weeks, life got in the way. Gigs, family, self-doubt. At first, he'd beat himself up, convinced he'd failed. Then he read Seneca's words, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." Thomas realized his biggest obstacle wasn't the missed days. It was the story he told himself about them. So he changed the script. When he slipped, he'd pick up his guitar the next day, no drama, no excuses. One song became 2, then 10, and by year's end, he had an album. His stumbles didn't stop him, they taught him how to rise faster. This practice of daily action isn't flashy. It's not the kind of thing you post on social media or brag about at parties. It's quiet, repetitive, sometimes tedious, but it's powerful. Every time you show up, you're carving a groove in your soul, a path that becomes easier to walk the more you tread it. You're training yourself to be someone who doesn't flinch at discomfort, who doesn't crumble under pressure, who doesn't need permission to begin. The Stoics called this discipline the art of living, and it's available to you right now in this moment with one small choice. You don't need more time, more resources, more anything. You just need the courage to act today and then again tomorrow. Over time, these daily choices become something more than habits. They become momentum. They become the current that carries you forward, even on the days you feel like giving up. But to sustain that momentum, you need to understand how it's built, how each small action stacks up into something unstoppable. Let's explore that next, because the secret to a life of purpose lies in the steady pulse of showing up, again and again, no matter what. Building momentum, unleashing your inner strength. There's a rhythm to progress, a quiet pulse that starts with a single step and grows into a force you can't ignore. It's not loud or flashy. No trumpets blare. No crowds cheer. It's the steady beat of showing up, day after day, keeping the promises you made to yourself when no one was watching. That rhythm is momentum, and once it takes hold, it's like a river carving through stone. Slow at first, but unstoppable over time. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the Stoic secret of building this inner strength, not through grand gestures, but through the small, consistent actions that transform you from the inside out. Because when you commit to doing what you said you'd do, you're not just checking off tasks. You're forging a version of yourself that's powerful, resilient, and free. This is where discipline becomes your nature, where confidence grows not from praise, but from the unshakable truth that you can rely on you. Momentum doesn't start with a sprint, it starts with a shuffle. A single choice to act, no matter how small, sets the wheel in motion. Maybe it's waking up 5 minutes earlier to journal, reading one page of a book, or doing a quick stretch before bed. These acts seem insignificant, like drops of water in a bucket, but they accumulate. Each one is a signal to your brain. I'm moving forward. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They didn't wait for inspiration to strike. They acted, knowing that action itself is the spark that ignites progress. Seneca wrote, "Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life." Every morning is a fresh start, a chance to add another drop to that bucket, to keep the wheel turning. Over time, those drops become a flood, and that will spin so fast it carries you even when you're tired, even when you doubt yourself, even when the world feels heavy. Think of Aisha, a graphic designer in Los Angeles who always wanted to run a marathon. She wasn't an athlete. Her days were filled with deadlines, coffee runs, and late-night sketches. But one day, she made a simple promise. Jog for 10 minutes, 3 times a week. The first few runs were brutal. Her lungs burned, her legs protested, and that voice in her head whispered, "This isn't for you." But Aisha kept going, not because she felt like a runner, but because she'd made a commitment. Those 10 minutes became 15, then 30, then miles. By the time she crossed the finish line of her first 5K, she wasn't just faster. She was different. She stood taller, spoke with more conviction, tackled her work with a clarity she'd never known. Aisha didn't just build endurance. She built momentum, a current that carried her far beyond the track. It wasn't the marathon that changed her. It was the daily choice to lace up her shoes, to show up when it was hard, to prove to herself she could keep going. That's the beauty of momentum. It feeds itself. The more you act, the easier it gets, not because the tasks change, but because you do. The Stoics called this habituating virtue, the process of turning discipline into a reflex, like breathing or blinking. When you're consistent, resistance starts to fade. The voice that once screamed, "Not today," grows quieter, drowned out by the rhythm of your actions. You stop negotiating with laziness or doubt because you've trained yourself to move forward anyway. This isn't about willpower, it's about inertia. Once you get moving, it's harder to stop than to keep going. That's why the smallest actions matter so much. They're not just steps. They're votes for the person you're becoming, each one reinforcing the truth that you're capable, reliable, strong. But momentum isn't just about doing more. It's about becoming more. It's about the confidence that blooms when you trust yourself, not because someone clapped for you, but because you showed up when no one was looking. Real confidence isn't loud or boastful. It's quiet, steady, rooted in evidence you've built over time. Picture David, a mechanic in Detroit who wanted to learn Spanish to connect with his grandparents' heritage. He started with 5 minutes a day on a language app, fumbling through verbs and accents. Some days he nailed it. Others, he forgot half the words he'd learned. But he kept at it not for a grade or a pat on the back, but for himself. Months later, he surprised his abuela with a halting conversation over coffee. It wasn't fluent, but it was real, and so was the pride in his chest. David's confidence didn't come from mastering Spanish overnight. It came from knowing he'd kept his word day after day, through frustration and fatigue. That knowledge became his anchor, a truth no one could take away. This kind of confidence is different. It's not fragile, not dependent on likes, applause, or validation. It's forged in the silent moments when you choose discipline over comfort, when you do the hard thing because you said you would. The Stoics believed that true power lies in self-mastery, in governing your impulses instead of being governed by them. Every time you act consistently, you're claiming that power. You're teaching yourself that you don't need perfect conditions, that you don't need to feel ready, that you don't need anyone's permission to grow. You become the rock in your own life, unshaken by storms because you've built something solid inside you, something earned, not given. Momentum also changes how you see the world. Obstacles that once loomed large start to shrink, not because they're smaller, but because you're bigger. You've faced your own resistance so many times that external challenges feel less daunting. You've proven to yourself that you can keep going, so why would a setback stop you now? This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that stands firm no matter what comes. Every small act of consistency adds another brick to that citadel, making it stronger, taller, more impregnable. Over time, you don't just have momentum, you have power, the kind that lets you walk through life with clarity and purpose, knowing you're not at the mercy of your moods or circumstances. But this strength isn't built in a vacuum. It's tested, again and again, by the one thing we all face: failure. No matter how much momentum you build, there will be days when you stumble, when the rhythm falters, when you fall short of your own standards. That's not the end of the story. It's just another chapter. Let's turn to that next, because what you do when you fall defines not just your momentum, but who you are. Content 7. Rising stronger after every fall. Failure isn't a stranger. It's a companion, walking beside you on every path worth taking. No matter how disciplined you are, how many promises you've kept, there will be moments when you trip, when you break your word, when you look at yourself and wonder, why didn't I do it? The Stoics didn't pretend failure could be avoided. They embraced it not as a defeat, but as a teacher. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the art of rising after you fall, the Stoic practice of turning setbacks into stepping stones. Because the danger isn't in failing, it's in staying down, in letting one misstep become a reason to quit. Every fall is a chance to learn, to grow, to prove to yourself that you're not defined by your mistakes, but by your courage to stand back up, right now, and keep going. Failure feels personal, doesn't it? When you skip a goal, miss a deadline, or let a promise slip, it's easy to spiral into self-doubt. You tell yourself, I'm not cut out for this, or maybe I'm just not good enough. That voice is loud, convincing, and oh so wrong. The Stoics saw failure differently, not as a verdict on your worth, but as a signal, a moment to pause and reflect. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do it not. If it is not true, say it not. But when you stumble, return to the path." That return is everything. It's not about never falling. It's about how quickly you rise, how honestly you face the stumble, how fiercely you refuse to let it write your story. Take Sarah, a baker in Portland who dreamed of opening her own cafe. She'd spend hours sketching menus, imagining a cozy space filled with the smell of fresh bread. But when she started saving for it, life threw curveballs, car repairs, medical bills, a leaky roof. Some months, she couldn't save a dime, and that voice crept in, "You failed. Just give up." At first, she listened, letting weeks pass without touching her plans. But then she read Epictetus, "You are not your circumstances. You are your choices." That shifted something. Sarah realized her failure wasn't the empty savings account. It was believing that one bad month meant she should stop. So she started again, small and scrappy. She baked for friends, sold at farmers markets, saved what she could. Some days, she stumbled, overslept, burned a batch, doubted herself. But each time, she got back up, not waiting for a perfect Monday or a fresh year. By the time her cafe opened, it wasn't just a business. It was a testament to her resilience, built on every moment she chose to rise. The Stoics didn't see failure as the opposite of success. They saw it as part of it. Every stumble carries a lesson, if you're willing to listen. Maybe you missed a workout because you overcommit. Learn to set realistic goals. Maybe you snapped at a friend because you were stressed. Learn to pause and breathe. These aren't punishments, they're invitations to grow. The danger comes when you ignore them, when you let one failure become a pattern, a story you tell yourself about why you can't. That's where the real defeat lies. Not in the fall, but in the choice to stay down, to wait for a better time that never arrives. The Stoics would tell you there's no better time than now. The moment you notice you've slipped is the moment to act, to dust yourself off, to return to the work. No drama, no excuses, just the quiet resolve to begin again. Think of Jamal, a student in Chicago studying for law school. He'd set a goal to review one chapter a day, but some nights exhaustion won, Netflix binges, late-night chats, anything but studying. Each miss felt like proof he wasn't serious, and he'd spiral, thinking, I'll catch up next week. But next week never worked, it just piled on guilt. Then he stumbled on Seneca's idea that life is long if you know how to use it. Jamal realized he wasn't failing because he missed a night. He was failing because he kept delaying his comeback. So he changed his approach. When he slipped, he'd pick up his book the next morning, even for 10 minutes. No beating himself up, no grand resolutions, just action. Those 10 minutes became hours, those hours became habits. And by exam day, he was ready, not perfect, but prepared. Jamal's strength wasn't in never failing. It was in learning to rise faster, to treat each stumble as a signal, not a sentence. This practice of rising builds something deeper than success. It builds resilience. Every time you get back up, you're forging a muscle, one that grows stronger with every use. You're teaching yourself that failure isn't final, that you're not fragile, that you can handle whatever comes. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate, embracing everything that happens, even the falls, because they shape you into someone unbreakable. When you rise quickly, you take away failure's power to define you. You turn it into a stepping stone, a moment that makes you sharper, wiser, tougher. Over time, you stop fearing failure because you know you've faced it before and come out stronger. You become someone who doesn't just survive setbacks, you thrive through them. That resilience changes how you move through the world. You walk with a quiet assurance, not because you're flawless, but because you've proven you can stand again. You face challenges with clarity, not panic, because you've trained yourself to act, not freeze. This is the Stoic gift. Not a life without falls, but a life where falls don't stop you. Every time you rise, you're casting a vote for the person you want to be. Someone who doesn't quit, who doesn't wait, who doesn't let a bad day become a bad life. That person is already inside you, waiting for you to give them a chance, waiting for you to choose action over despair, truth over surrender. We've built momentum and learned to rise, but there's one more piece to this puzzle. How these daily choices shape not just your habits, but your entire mindset. Let's explore that next, because the way you think about yourself and your actions is the foundation of a life that's truly unstoppable. The unstoppable mindset. Imagine waking up each morning with a quiet fire in your chest. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know you'll show up for yourself, no matter what. It's not about hitting every goal or never missing a step. It's about the unshakable commitment to keep moving forward, to honor your word, to choose progress over perfection. This is the unstoppable mindset, the Stoic philosophy that transforms you from someone who dreams into someone who does. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into how this mindset isn't reserved for the elite or the flawless. It's available to you right now through the daily choice to act with integrity. Because true freedom isn't found in avoiding mistakes. It's found in mastering yourself, in becoming the kind of person you admire. Not through words, but through the relentless, honest actions that shape your life. The goal isn't perfection. Perfection is a mirage, shimmering in the distance, always out of reach. Chase it, and you'll exhaust yourself, tripping over every flaw, beating yourself up for every misstep. The Stoics knew this trap well. They didn't aim for a life without blemishes. They aimed for a life of progress, of steady improvement, of becoming better today than they were yesterday. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That's the heart of the unstoppable mindset. It's not about being flawless. It's about being faithful to your own standards, about keeping your word even when the promise feels small. Whether it's drinking a glass of water instead of soda, writing one sentence toward your novel, or saying no to a distraction, each act is a brick in the foundation of your character. It's a vote for the person you're building. A person who doesn't wait for the spotlight to shine, who doesn't need a cheering crowd to move forward. Consider Mia, a paralegal in New York who always wanted to start a blog about mental health. She'd spend hours scrolling through other people's posts, dreaming of her own, but perfectionism kept her stuck. "It's not good enough yet," she'd tell herself, tweaking drafts that never saw the light of day. One day, she stumbled across Seneca's words, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." That hit hard. Mia realized she wasn't failing because her writing wasn't perfect. She was failing because she wasn't sharing it. So she made a promise. Post one piece a week, no matter how ready it felt. The first few were rough, typos, clunky sentences, zero comments. But she kept going, not aiming for viral fame, but for consistency. Over months, her voice grew stronger, her posts sharper, and readers started showing up. Not thousands, but enough to matter. Mia's blog wasn't perfect, but it was real, and so was the confidence she gained. She became unstoppable, not because she never doubted herself, but because she chose progress over paralysis, action over endless editing. That's what sets the unstoppable mindset apart. It's grounded in truth, not illusion. You don't need to be the best, you need to be better than you were. You don't need to conquer every fear, you need to act despite them. This mindset shifts your focus from what you lack to what you control, from what could go wrong to what you can do right now. It's about weaving integrity into the fabric of your life until keeping your word becomes as natural as breathing. When you promise yourself you'll meditate for 5 minutes and do it, you're not just calming your mind, you're proving you're someone who follows through. When you say you'll call a friend and pick up the phone, you're not just nurturing a relationship, you're reinforcing your own reliability. These moments, small as they seem, are the threads that stitch together a life of purpose, a life where you don't just hope to be strong. You are strong because you've built it choice by choice. Self-mastery is the ultimate freedom, the Stoics taught, and it's not found in controlling the world around you. It's found in controlling yourself, your impulses, your doubts, your tendency to shrink when things get hard. Every act of discipline is a step toward that freedom, a declaration that you're not at the mercy of your moods or circumstances. Think of Ethan, a landscaper in Nashville who struggled with anger. He'd snap at coworkers, regret it, then promise to change, only to snap again. Frustrated, he read Epictetus. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Ethan decided to try something small. When he felt his temper flare, he'd count to 5 before speaking. It wasn't a cure-all. Some days he still lost it, but he kept at it, not aiming for sainthood, but for progress. Over time, those 5 seconds became a habit, then a reflex. He didn't just manage his anger, he reshaped how he saw himself. Ethan became someone he admired, not because he was perfect, but because he was disciplined, because he chose to act instead of react, day after day. This mindset doesn't shout, it whispers. It shows up in how you carry yourself, how you face challenges, how you hold steady when life shakes. It's not about never feeling fear or doubt. It's about refusing to let them steer the ship. You become the captain of your own soul, charting the course not with grand declarations, but with quiet, deliberate choices. The Stoics believe that character is destiny, and every time you keep your word, you're shaping that destiny, crafting a life where you don't need to explain yourself because your actions speak louder than words. You become someone who doesn't just dream of greatness, you live it one small, unstoppable step at a time. But this mindset isn't built in a vacuum. It's honed through practice, through the daily grind of showing up when it's hard, when it's boring, when no one's watching. That's where the real work happens, where the seeds of self-mastery are planted and nurtured. Let's dive into that next, because the path to greatness isn't a sprint. It's a marathon, Run one intentional day at a time. Self-mastery through daily practice. Greatness doesn't arrive with a fanfare. It doesn't knock on your door with a trophy or a headline. It creeps in quietly, built from the ground up through choices so small they're almost invisible. Choices no one will ever applaud, moments no one will ever see. This is the Stoic art of self-mastery, the practice of turning your intentions into actions, day after day, until they become the very fabric of who you are. On ZenLight 8, we're exploring how true strength is forged not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, in the repetitive, unglamorous work of keeping your word to yourself. Because self-mastery isn't a destination you reach. It's a road you choose to walk, starting right now, no matter where you stand or what stands in your way. The Stoics didn't believe in waiting for epiphanies. They believed in doing the work every single day, whether the sun was shining or the skies were gray. Seneca wrote, "Each day, acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, against every other calamity." That something isn't money or fame. It's character, built through the quiet discipline of daily practice. It's the choice to get up when you'd rather sleep, to write when you'd rather scroll, to listen when you'd rather speak. These moments don't make headlines, but they make you. They're the chisel strokes that carve your soul into something solid, something enduring, something you can stand beside with pride. Every time you act with intention, you're not just completing a task. You're sculpting a life that aligns with your deepest values, a life that feels true. Think of Clara, a retiree in San Diego who wanted to learn to paint. At 65, she felt silly picking up a brush. Her hands weren't steady, her eyes weren't sharp, but she'd always dreamed of capturing the ocean on canvas. So she made a vow, 15 minutes a day, no matter what. Some days, her paintings looked like a child's scribbles. Others, she saw glimmers of beauty. There were weeks she wanted to quit, convinced she was too old to start. But Clara kept showing up, not for a gallery show, but for herself. Over years, her strokes grew surer, her colors bolder. She never sold a piece, but her walls bloomed with seascapes, each one a testament to her persistence. Clara's greatness wasn't in her art. It was in her practice, in the daily choice to honor her dream, to build a skill not for applause, but for the joy of becoming. This is the power of daily practice. It transforms you, not through sudden leaps, but through steady steps. Every time you choose action over avoidance, you're laying down a brick in the fortress of your character. It's not about the outcome. It's about the process, about becoming someone who doesn't flinch at effort, who doesn't shy away from commitment. The Stoics saw life as a craft, and every day as a chance to refine it. When you meditate for 5 minutes, you're not just calming your mind, you're training yourself to focus. When you cook a healthy meal, you're not just eating well, you're teaching yourself to care for your body. These acts, repeated over time, become more than habits. They become your identity. You stop being someone who tries to be disciplined and start being someone who is disciplined, not because you declared it, but because you lived it. But daily practice isn't easy. It's repetitive, sometimes tedious, often invisible. There's no immediate reward, no instant gratification. That's why so many give up, because they want the result without the work, the summit without the climb. The Stoics would shake their heads at that. They knew that mastery is a path, not a prize, and every step along it matters. Picture Javier, a delivery driver in Houston who wanted to save for his daughter's college. Money was tight and big savings felt impossible. So he started small. Skip 1 coffee a week, put $5 in a jar. It wasn't much, just a few coins clinking against glass. But he did it every week, no matter how broke he felt. Some months, he was tempted to skip it, to treat himself instead. But Javier kept going, not dreaming of millions, but of his daughter's future. Over years, that jar became a fund, modest but real. Javier's triumph wasn't the dollars. It was the discipline, the daily choice to prioritize what mattered, to build something lasting out of something small. This path of self-mastery doesn't demand perfection. It demands persistence. You'll have days when you're tired, when life pulls you in a dozen directions, when you wonder if it's worth it. That's when the Stoics would remind you, it's worth it because it's you. Every time you practice, you're investing in yourself, in a version of you that's stronger, clearer, freer. You're building a life where you don't need to hide from your own reflection, where you don't need to make excuses, where you don't need to wonder what might have been. Self-mastery is the courage to act today, right now, despite the noise, despite the doubt, despite the messiness of being human. It's the choice to show up again and again until showing up is who you are. We've crafted a mindset and a practice that make you unstoppable, but there's one final piece: how this strength ripples outward, changing not just you, but the world around you. Let's explore that next, because when you master yourself, you become a light for others, a living proof that truth and action can transform everything. The ripple effect of integrity. When you stop lying to yourself, something extraordinary happens. Not just within you, but around you. It's as if you've dropped a stone into a still pond, and the ripples spread far beyond where you stand, touching lives you may never fully know. Living with integrity, keeping your word, and acting with truth doesn't just reshape your own path. It becomes a beacon, a quiet force that inspires others without you ever needing to say a word. On ZenLight 8, we're diving into the Stoic truth that your commitment to yourself doesn't end with you. It radiates outward, shifting how you show up in the world, how others see you, and how they see themselves. Because when you live in alignment with your values, you become a lighthouse, guiding those lost in the fog toward their own strength, their own truth, their own freedom. Integrity is magnetic. It's not loud or showy. It doesn't demand attention or beg for applause. It's the steady pulse of reliability, the unspoken promise that you are who you say you are. When you keep your word to yourself, you start to carry yourself differently. Your shoulders straighten, your voice grows surer, your presence feels grounded. People notice, not because you're shouting about your accomplishments, but because there's a calm certainty in how you move through life. You become someone others trust, not because you've told them to, but because you've proven it day after day in ways both big and small. Your actions speak louder than any speech, and that authenticity draws people in, like moths to a flame, seeking the light of someone who lives what they believe. Think of Elena, a high school teacher in Atlanta who decided to stop making excuses about her health. For years, she'd promised herself she'd exercise, only to let tomorrow win. One day, she started small. A 15-minute walk every evening, no matter how tired she was from grading papers. At first, it was just for her. A private vow to feel better, to sleep better, to live better. But her students noticed. They saw her energy shift, her patience deepen, her smile come easier. One shy sophomore, inspired by Elena's quiet consistency, asked her about it. "How do you keep going?" he said. Elena shared her story, not as a lecture, but as a truth. That student started running not to impress anyone, but because Elena's example showed him he could. Her integrity didn't just change her. It planted a seed in someone else, a ripple that grew into a wave of courage for a kid who needed it most. This is the ripple effect. Your choices, your discipline, your truth become a mirror for others to see what's possible. You don't have to preach or posture. Your life becomes the lesson. When you show up consistently, you remind those around you that they can, too. Your reliability becomes a challenge, not in a confrontational way, but in a quiet, undeniable one. People look at you and think, if they can do it, maybe I can. Your strength becomes their permission to try, to rise, to let go of their own excuses. The Stoics understood this power. They lived with such integrity that their words echoed through centuries, not because they sought fame, but because they sought truth. When you live the same way, you become a living testament to what happens when someone stops lying to themselves and starts acting with purpose. But the ripple effect starts even closer, within you. When you live with integrity, something shifts deep inside. You stop needing the world's approval because you've already earned your own. You stop chasing validation in likes, compliments, or promotions because your actions validate you every single day. This is the confidence the Stoics prized, not a loud bravado, but a quiet certainty, a knowing that you're living in alignment with who you claim to be. Picture Marcus, a barista in Seattle who used to feel like an imposter, always waiting for someone to discover he wasn't enough. He started small, promising himself he'd read one chapter a week to grow his mind. Some weeks he barely made it through a page, but he kept at it not for a degree, but for himself. Over time, that practice changed him. He stopped doubting his worth, stopped shrinking in conversations, stopped feeling like he had to prove himself. Marcus didn't need the world to tell him he was enough. His integrity told him, every time he opened a book and honored his word. This confidence is unshakable because it's not built on sand. It's built on the rock of your actions, on the promises you've kept when no one was watching. You stop wondering if you're worthy because you've proven it not to others but to the only person who matters, you. And that truth sets you free. Free from the need to perform, free from the fear of judgment, free to live a life that feels honest, whole, and yours. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, a flourishing of the soul, and it's not reserved for philosophers or kings. It's available to you, right now, through the simple act of doing what you said you'd do. But the ripple doesn't stop with your own peace. It touches everyone you meet. Your consistency becomes contagious, your discipline an invitation. You become the friend others turn to when they're lost, not because you have all the answers, but because you've shown you can be counted on. You become the coworker who lifts the team, not because you're loud, but because you're steady. You become the parent, the partner, the stranger who reminds someone, without a word, that they're capable of more. Think of Amina, a nurse in Chicago who started journaling every night to process her long shifts. It was private, just a few sentences to clear her mind. But her daughter noticed, saw how her mom seemed calmer, more present. One day, that daughter picked up a notebook of her own, scribbling thoughts she'd never shared. Amina's small act of integrity didn't just ground her. It showed her daughter the power of reflection, a gift that will ripple through her life for years. This is the beauty of integrity. It's not confined to you. It spreads, quietly but powerfully, changing the world in ways you may never see. A friend sees your discipline and decides to try again. A colleague watches you handle stress and rethinks their own chaos. A stranger sees you keep going and finds the courage to start. You become a lighthouse not because you sought the role, but because you chose to live with truth. Your life becomes proof that transformation isn't a myth. It's a choice made every day, in the moments no one else sees. The Stoics knew this, and they lived it, leaving a legacy that still lights our way. You have that same power, right now, to be a beacon for others, to show them that freedom comes not from perfection, but from persistence, from the quiet resolve to stop lying to yourself and start living in truth. Your life is a story, written not in ink, but in actions, each one a sentence, each day a page. You've stood at the edge of your own promises, felt the weight of excuses, heard the whispers of later. But you've also felt the spark of truth, the strength that comes when you keep your word, the freedom of knowing you're someone you can trust. This journey through Stoic wisdom, from confronting self-deception to building an unstoppable mindset, hasn't been about becoming someone else. It's been about becoming you, the you who doesn't shrink from discomfort, who doesn't settle for less, who doesn't need permission to grow. Every small choice to act, to rise, to live with integrity has been a brushstroke on the canvas of your soul, painting a life that's not just lived, but earned. The Stoics didn't promise a life without storms. They promised a life where you could stand tall through them. They taught us that greatness isn't found in what you achieve, but in who you become through the choices you make, day after day, in the silence of your own heart. You've seen the cost of breaking your word, the power of keeping it, the momentum that builds when you show up, the resilience that grows when you rise. You've learned that self-mastery is a path, not a prize, and that integrity doesn't just change you. It changes everyone around you, rippling outward in ways that echo beyond your lifetime. This is your legacy, not written in stone, but lived in truth. A truth that says you chose to act, to grow, to be the person you promised yourself you'd be. In a world that's louder than ever, filled with notifications, opinions, and endless distractions, the Stoic path is a lifeline. Social media tempts us to compare, to seek likes instead of truth. Work pushes us to hustle without purpose. Life pulls us in 1,000 directions, whispering that we don't have time to be who we want to be. But you do have time every single day. Start small. Put your phone down for 5 minutes and breathe. Write one sentence toward your dream. Take one step toward a goal, even if it's tiny. These aren't just tasks. They're rebellions against a world that wants you to drift. In 2025, with AI buzzing and cities humming, the greatest technology is still your own mind, your own resolve. Use it to build a life that's yours, not someone else's script. The Stoics would nod at that. They'd tell you the noise doesn't matter, only your choices do. So choose now, choose today, choose you. This is your moment, right here, right now. Don't let it slip away with a promise of later. Join us at ZenLight 8, where we're not just talking about a better life, we're building it one honest action at a time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and dive into the comments below with one word that captures your spark today: truth. Share it to remind yourself and others that this journey starts with a single powerful choice. Let's keep the ripple going, because when you live in truth, you don't just change your life, you change the world.